I'm super excited about the kickoff to this series because I believe that this is something that will literally change your life if you walk with us through this entire series and you do some of the components that we have put together for you to do, because this will be a time of deep reflection, a time of deep kind of self-discovery, but not just discovering things about yourself for yourself, but discovering things about who God is and who God says you are. And so I believe that this is a profound series. When you walked in today, or as you leave today, pick up one of these books. Because in these books have individual times of journaling, times of reflection, prompts that you can have. They're individual challenges. We like to call them that way because sometimes people just like to overcome challenges. Here, this is a book of challenges for you, but it also kind of builds into a connect group experience. And connect groups are, we love connect groups around here because we believe you grow faster and you grow stronger inside the context of a connect group. Life is better in community. And in fact, we were created for relationships, and so that's what connect groups really embody. And so get a book, go through the individual journeys, come here on the weekends, and then get involved in a connect group. We're going to talk a little bit about that. But this is a series all about your identity. Do you know who you really are? There are two camps of people here today. One would say, hey, yeah, I know who I am. And you may be right. You may be right. You may know who you are, but I believe that you may not know everything about who you are. Then this is a journey designed to help you become better, to know why you were created, and to dig into something so important, so core to your destiny. And so some of you know a lot about yourself, but the onion kind of needs to be pulled back even more. And as soon as you stop the process of self-discovery, as soon as you stop the process of seeking God, as soon as you stop that process, you stop the process of kind of getting empowered in your life, of really seeing the purpose that God has for you. And others think that, hey, we know ourselves, we know ourselves, but we really have no idea. That's the other camp, right? I know who I am, but really you probably have no idea. And I'm not really going to say, hey, you probably think you have an idea, but as you go through this series, it'll just kind of be like just whoa moments left and right. And this is why your occupational life is so frustrating. You don't know how God has created you, how he has wired you, so you keep getting the wrong job or in the wrong company, and you keep saying the wrong things. This is why some of us can't get ahead and financially because we're not in the right place. This is why some of us have broken relationships regularly. Why some of us have a new cycle of friends every 5 years and we can't kind of figure it out because we don't know ourselves well enough to know that we fry people. It's why some have a hard time in marriage. It's why, or even thinking about marriage, because we really don't know ourselves. So that's why I'm so excited for this series. I'm so excited for this journey because your life is about to change. You're going to see exactly how valuable you are and how powerful your life can be if you align yourself with him and see your life as God sees it. Well, we're going to look at a few passages, but it's good to talk at the beginning. And so we're going to look at Genesis chapter 2. It literally says this: it is not good for man to be alone. It's not good for man to be alone. It's not good for woman to be alone, for anybody to be alone, because we were created for relationships. When we are around people, we see things that we can't see in ourselves. We need people to help us discern things. We just do, and that's why connect groups are so important. This series is maximized within the context of these smaller groups. You're going to have the booklet where you'll journey through some experiences individually, and then you'll come together and you'll do some things collectively in your group. And if you need a group, great. Please sign up before you leave at the Connect Center. This is a perfect time to start your group because there's something that is said a lot, and it simply is not the case. How many of you were told when you were a kid, hey, you can be anything you want to be? Right? I'm going to burst that bubble today. Because you cannot be anything that you want to be. If you are 5'4", you will not be in the NBA. I don't care how good you are. Right? Like some of us, there's no way that you could be, perhaps president of the United States. I don't know, right? Maybe you're not born in the United States. All kind of factors will factor in. You cannot be anything you want to be. But there's this thing in our culture, right? And it's like, think big, think whatever you want. You can be it. And that leads to a very frustrating and unfruitful life. It leads to something that is so out of step with your identity, out of step with who you really are. And in our culture, we are obsessed with who we are, right? We love taking online quizzes. We love taking these Facebook polls to see which Friends character we actually identify with, right? We love doing that. We love taking like personality assessments like Myers-Briggs or DISC assessments or strength finders or things like that. We love to figure out who we are. Yet, we don't want anybody to tell us who we are, right? Don't tell me who you think I am. We don't want people speaking into our life. And this is all over the media, right? We don't want to be labeled as something. We don't let it happen. Don't label me. Don't put a label on me. But we're okay identifying ourselves with an animal or some specific letters. If I do it, but you can't tell me anything about myself because you don't know me. You are irrelevant. You have no power over me. And that's kind of what culture has really, what we're in, what it says to us all the time. And this is part of why we've really gone askew. We need each other. We need God because God tells you who you are. And I don't mean like general spiritual stuff like God tells you that you're a nice, loving person. I mean specific things that God tells you. He says, I know who you are, and I want to tell you, and the more that you listen to him, the more you will unlock the real you. And if you do this journey right, your life will change. Your upbringing has a huge impact in creating who you are, in creating your identity, your family unit, whatever that looks like, right? Whether a two-parent household, whether a single-parent household, whether a foster parent household, whether your parents are your birth parents or your adopted parents, what have you, your siblings, your grandparents, your environment, they all play a huge part, and they all kind of play into this thing we kind of say is our identity, kind of shapes who we are. And Jesus, he actually tells us, he was teaching the disciples, he was saying, hey, if you believe in me, you will be adopted into God's family. That he adopts us into his family. He's very clear that we are adopted into God's family, and not everyone is in God's family. Now, maybe you're shadowing today. That not everyone is in God's family, but we can be adopted into his family. And according to Jesus, everyone is loved by God. Everyone is cared for by God, but not everyone is in God's family. There's a step. And the Apostle John, after he spent all his life walking with Jesus, learning from Jesus, he writes this in one of his, in the very beginning of his account about Jesus. He says, but to all who have received Jesus and believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. We have the right. If we believe in him, if we received him, and we believe in his name, he gave the right to actually become children of God. And we're going to talk about this in a minute. It's kind of wild in our culture where when we don't understand our identity, parents maybe are even afraid to tell their kids who they are. Parents are uniquely positioned to tell your kids about things about themselves that they cannot know for themselves or they can't even understand about themselves. You're uniquely positioned to do that. But sometimes we get scared about this because we don't want to label our kids. So we're going to talk about these things. So in the beginning, Jesus, Genesis, we find this whole story, this whole creation story. We find out what it means for you and I to have an identity and what it means for you and I to have an image of God himself. In fact, we're going to pick up this story right here in Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. It says this. It says, let us make man in our image, in our likeness. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, this kind of collective thing. Yes, it says our, as in God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Let us make man in our image. Let me just tell you something real quick. If God needs a group, you should be in a group. right? Like, you should be in a group. You just get signed up for a Connect group. I'm just telling you that. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. It goes on so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals and all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. And then God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. God tells human beings, tells Adam and Eve, tells human beings something that he doesn't tell anybody else. He doesn't tell chipmunks this. He doesn't tell fish this, not lions, nothing. And we're going to see these things over and over and over again throughout this journey. And the first thing is that image gives us a validity. It gives us validity. Image gives us validity. They are created in the image of God. Now, it doesn't matter what we kind of perceive as the start of this, and we're going to kind of get into that a little bit, but that God created mankind in his image. We are created in his image, not any of these other creatures. And it's pretty crazy that you and I have something powerfully in common with God, and it validates you. It validates you that God cares about you and created you and is doing something in you right now. Many things, there's many things in science that I love. And sometimes folks can kind of go to the extreme and to eliminate the idea of the divine or God from science, which I think is kind of mentally unwise. And vice versa. We can be like, okay, we're going to eliminate everything out. We're going to eliminate this, on both sides of that. So maybe God did create the world with a big bang. Maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe he did. Maybe God chose to take a long, long, long time to evolve things, and maybe he did choose to do things that way. I don't know. That's entirely different than saying out of total randomness, poof, there was this big bang, and out of total randomness, there was this amalgamation of proteins and cells that did something, and here's you. There was goo, and then there was you. Don't you feel important with that? No, you don't feel important. If there's any reason that we have self-esteem issues or self-image issues, is there any reason that we doubt or that we feel like we don't matter? Because in that system, in that kind of like just randomness system that's increasingly popular, guess what? You don't matter. You don't matter. You are nothingness. It doesn't matter what you do or what happens. There's nobody who loves you eternally. There's nobody who knows anything about you that's transcendent. There's nobody who's designed you for anything. Your image and your identity is, who cares? Whatever you want it to be. You are a random accident. But when you understand that God has created you, that he is doing something in you, it validates you. You walk with more confidence. You go into sticky situations knowing that there's an X factor of God. And you realize that even when things are going against you and people don't like you, that God likes you and he validates you. And that changes everything. See, we don't have to be a faith that discounts science. That's not good. That's not right. In fact, that's caused a lot of problems. We believe that God is a God of faith and a God of science, and these things work together. So I don't know if it was a literal, 6 days of creation or if it was millions of years. I don't know that. All I know is that God created you in his image. Because if he didn't, you don't matter. But if he did, there's some being that uniquely knows you, that cares for you, that has designed you for a purpose. We have to understand that this way to view ourselves, of unpacking ourselves, of our seeing of ourselves, is very, very foreign to our culture. In fact, there's a study, Barna Group, which is kind of on par with like Gallup polls and things like that, but they kind of do studies more in kind of in these religious circles. They did a study asking people with no religious affiliations and those who claim to be practicing Christians how they view a few certain things. And so the first one was, the best way to find yourself is by looking within. And you can kind of see that in the green circle, 91% of all U.S. adults believe that to be true. They agree with that. And 76% of practicing Christians also believe that to be true. To be fulfilled in life, you should pursue the things you desire most. 86% of all U.S. adults agree with that, and as well as 72% of practicing Christians. And then the highest goal of life is to enjoy it as much as possible. 84%, all U.S. adults, 67% of practicing Christians. This is a vast majority of Americans. You know, there's some difference in here. There's some difference in the percentages here, but by and large, this is a vast majority, not only of all U.S., but also practicing believers. And when I look at this, I'm like, man, that's sad. Because what this says is that no one here knows God. No one here knows the will of God for their life, or they're at least not living it. Because the best way to find yourself is not by looking within, because that's a very limited view. The best way to find yourself is for God to tell you who you are, to understand something outside of what you can know on your own. The best way to have a fulfilling life is not to do what you desire most. It's to be happy and do what God desires most, because when you get on God's plan and you do what He desires most, your life works. When you do what you desire most, it doesn't really work all that well. And it doesn't work for people around you, and it's very unsatisfying. The highest goal of life is to enjoy it as much as possible. Yes, if you are cosmic goo. And when you're over, you're over. That's fine. But know, if there's a God, and this is just a speck of time, and there's a God who's building something long before us, and He's building something long after us, then know the best thing in life is to get ready for real life, to align ourselves with Him, which is enjoyable, by the way. Very enjoyable. But the point of life is not to enjoy it as much as possible. The point of life is to honor God, to know who actually put me here. This is what we gotta have to know and live in. God said, let us make mankind in our image. It's really fascinating that this is in the Bible. There are no other spiritual documents or religious literature anywhere that if you want to know what God looks like, look at people. This is it. This is where we find this. In other ancient religions, spiritualities, there is a God that's out there, and they represent Him by some sort of image that they've carved, or they've kind of made into something. It may be an item, it may be like a totem pole, or this, this thing really isn't my God, but it kind of represents the image of my God that's out there, and this is kind of the best I have to work with. So I come here. God said in the Ten Commandments, you can find this in the book of Exodus, you can find this in the book of Deuteronomy. He says, you should have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth below, or that is in the water under the earth. Don't make any image of what you think I look like, basically God is saying. Why is that? Because it's you. It's you. This is why if you only spend time with yourself, you don't get enough of God. Because when you are around other people, you will actually get more of who God is. If over the next 6 weeks you're going to be by yourself, okay, but if you're going to get in a group, you've multiplied the likelihood of actually seeing and experiencing God in your life. Because the more you get around people, the more you're actually going to be able to see the nature and the character of God. Nature is awesome. Beautiful landscapes or seascapes and mountaintops. But if you want to see God, don't go to nature, go to the city. Because in the city, you see more people. And when you see people, different colors, different shapes, you get a better rounded perspective of who God is. You are the image of God, and that is awesome. That's awesome. See, we all have blind spots. We all do. That's why we need other people in our lives, to help us see the blind spots. Because we can go through life being like, I know who I am, I'm good at this, or I'm not good at this, or oh, this is what I think, and I really believe this. And then somebody comes along and either helps us in a loving way, challenges us, or encourages us, or maybe they see something or notice something in our lives that doesn't align with what we see in our lives, and they're able to help us grow, not because we saw it, but because we were around somebody else who saw our blind spot. You need to be around people. I don't know all what's entailed, but I do know this is why you do things your dog does not do. You do things that a shark will never do. You and I actually create. We have dreams. Dogs may have dreams, but they have never had a dream that will make their life any better. No other being will ever dream something that will make their life any better. No fish ever had a dream saying, okay, you know what? I think I can walk on land now. Let me make this thing, and I want to walk on land. Human beings are the only ones that are made to walk on land, and we had a dream, and we innovated not only how to swim, but how to kind of go really, really deep into the ocean, and we dreamed, and we innovated how to fly in the sky to even go to the moon. Only God's capacity inside humanity allowed for that to happen. We have a thirst for justice. As people, we have a thirst for justice, for social justice. We hunger for that. We thirst for that. We have a thirst to see the bad guy punished and a thirst to see what is right encouraged. We see that nowhere else in creation. There's no sense of justice in the jungle. My life right now is work and dinosaurs. My 2-year-old son loves him some dinosaurs. We watch Jurassic Park on loop all the time. It is crazy. Guess what doesn't exist with dinosaurs? Justice, right? They're like, hey, I'm hungry. You look good. Let me eat you. We want justice, and when something doesn't go right, it really bothers us because it bothers God. You are the very image of God. You can achieve great things that nothing else can do if you understand your identity inside that image. Image actually creates validity. It creates validity in your life. But also, image bestows ability. Image validates you, and that's super cool. You were created in the image of God. You are an image bearer. There are signs and clues to us that are hardwired to us. I don't understand it all, but it's pretty awesome to think about. And this passage is really clear that God has put man and woman on earth to do certain things that nothing else can do. He's given you unique abilities, and the sooner you figure out what these abilities are, the sooner your life will take off. The sooner you refine these abilities, the deeper your life will go. I'm talking about like aptitude abilities that enable you to have a relationship, aptitude and abilities that enable you to hold a job, to create a better future for yourself, aptitude and abilities to raise the water level of everybody in your life, aptitudes and abilities that enable you to do things beyond what anybody in your life expected you to do if they saw you when you were 5. Things that God has hardwired in you that there's no way that we would have been like, oh, man, that person's, we see that at an early age. They just are gifted in that. Like as a baby. We don't see that in babies. We hope. No 2-year-old is going around and being like, well, that's the next LeBron James. We don't do that. Right? But, these are aptitudes and abilities that God has kind of put us in. And we kind of see this. We see this all throughout in history. You've probably seen it in your own life. We also see it in the Bible. In Exodus, this is a book that Moses wrote. This is something that we find here, and it's very kind of, it doesn't necessarily fit into the whole scheme of what's actually happening at the time. It's just kind of filler, but I love filler verses because they actually give us a lot of insight, and I think this one does. It's in Exodus chapter 35. It says this. It says, the Lord has called by name Bezalel, has filled him with the Spirit of God, with skill, with intelligence, and with all craftsmanship to devise artistic designs, to work in gold and silver and bronze, to the cutting of stones for setting, and in carving wood for every skilled craft. It's like this verse is like saying, hey, God put this in this guy to be able to be this amazing designer and kind of craftsman. You have to understand that there are some things that even if you had the chance to do it, you wouldn't do it very well. You can't be anything that you want to be. If we all had the same art class, some of us would create a painting that looked great. Other of us, with the same love of education, the same coaching, would make something that looked awful. I know this because I've seen my artwork and my sister's artwork. My sister is an amazing artist. I draw stick people. If you had a vocational tech experience, and we all had that same experience in the same amount of time, some of us would be able to do it with ease. Some of us would just never be able to get it. If we all had an MBA from Harvard, some of us could lead and run a Fortune 100 company, and some of us simply could not do it. There are things that we have to kind of understand that even if you had the chance to do it, you wouldn't do it very well. You cannot be whatever you think you can be, and the longer you think that, the more you're going to frustrate your life, banging your head against the wall, making the same mistakes again and again, when that's not who you've been created to be. That's not the ability that God has given you. The longer you try to muscle yourself up, you might be able to improve to a level of proficiency. You might be somewhat proficient in it, but you'll never be great. You'll never instinctively do the thing. Whatever the ability is that produces significant results. Part of your identity is the things that God has enabled you to do. So now in this passage in Genesis, we read, the one that we read at the very beginning, we read that there are 3 abilities, and we're going to come back to these abilities over and over and over again throughout this journey, that you might have all of these to one degree or another. In fact, the more you mature, I believe that the more proficient you become in all 3 of these, but one of these things is your dominant ability. The more you understand this as part of your identity, the more powerful your identity will be. The first thing is to rule. To rule is the first of these. He says, I give you dominion to rule over the birds of the air and the fish and the creatures on the ground. It doesn't mean that you just get to do whatever you want. Ruling implies something different. It implies actually management. It implies seeing all these different pieces and these different things, and you kind of bring peace, or you bring justice, or you bring order, or you bring management systems or processes that enables an organization or community or a family to thrive and make sense. That's what ruling is. I give you dominion. I give you the chance to rule over all of these things. The second ability is to create. To create. This could be like an artist, right? Or an architect, a filmmaker, a performer, a baker, a hospitality worker, a developer. You take ideas and you just kind of create things. You call things out. You bring things into being that other people just can't. They haven't thought about or they don't have a vision for. And when you understand that you're a builder, there will always be things that need to be sustained, but you will always be building things. You will always be starting things. This is why people start companies and then kind of get pushed out. Because they're a starter, they're a creator, but they are not a ruler. So they're not good at managing and setting up processes, but they are good at getting things off the ground because they have a vision that other people just don't have. This is why when you're in a single-parent household, it is so difficult to raise kids because you need all 3 of these things to kind of be, to operate. And it's so hard for us to have all 3 of these things really operate so well in our lives. And that's why we need to come alongside and be the church and be the family in those kind of situations. But so we're able to rule. We're able to create. The last ability that he points out in these verses is we're able to increase. It says, be fruitful and increase in number. Be fruitful and multiply. There are some that anything you give them, they increase it. I mean, these people poop money. They just increase. You don't know how it is. You don't know. Don't you know people like this? Maybe you are a person like this. Maybe you're one of them. That money is never an issue because you just have the ability to increase it. Or you have the ability to increase sales, and there is something to it that whenever this person is around, they can see if we do this or if we tweak that, then this result's going to be super productive. An entrepreneur, a marketer, a salesperson, a farmer, an investment advisor, a banker. If you're not into increase or things don't increase around you, don't get into one of these professions because you will stink at it. But the people that are great in all these professions, it's part of their identity, part of their name is increase. It's not just I'm a child of God. That's my main identity. That's who I am. That's where it starts. I'm an adopted son or daughter of God. And then what does that mean? That means that he's calling me and equipping me to do things inside the family. To rule, to create, to increase. You have one of those as a dominant ability in your life, and you may be able to operate in more than one. Image validates you. Image bestows ability. Image also enables authority. When you see and understand that God has given you an identity, an ability, he has validated you, you walk in a room like, I'm ready. I'm ready because I know who I am. I know my capabilities. I know that God is for me, and you operate in that authority, and you won't get knocked down as much. This helps you take criticism well. Because when you know your identity, you realize that you may be right, you may be wrong, but this is something that God's given you. This is something that he's enabled you to do. And you realize that people's approval of you doesn't authorize them or your identity. It doesn't affect your identity. God authorizes my identity. He is my authority. This is why parents are sometimes afraid to exert authority. Your identity as a parent, you know more than your kid. You've seen more than your kid. You're wiser than your kid. You should be able to tell your kids who they are. We're so afraid to tell them, and that's why we have a lot of these image issues today. That's why kids are killing themselves. They don't know who they are, and they're trying to figure it out so desperately. Parents, you have a unique position to be able to speak into your kids' lives. To be that authority as image bearers, bestowing ability that they just are not sure of yet. The core of your frustrations in your life is your identity. The core of the pain in your life is in your identity. The core of your future is in your identity. There's nothing better that you can do in your life than to figure out, who am I really? Who does God want me to be? What has he designed for me? You're not going to be able to binge watch this. It's going to be a process, and we're going to help you through this process. We're going to help you hear from God. We're going to help you kind of through this whole thing. That's why these books are so important. And go through these personal journeys. Go do these personal challenges. Some of them be really quick. Some of them you'll have to think a little bit through. But do them. They'll be extremely helpful throughout the entire journey together. Get in a group. Yeah, you're going to have to do some individual stuff, but you need to be in a group environment. And you're going to have to wait to hear that still small voice of God, where it's just not going to happen immediately, is what I'm trying to say. And if you walk in that, your relationship with God is going to be so profound, and your life is going to be so powerful if you just unlock the answer to this blank. Let me pray for you today.